Welcome, everyone, to Brandao Collection. Today, we continue our interview series where we speak to different collectors about their collections and a little bit about themselves. Today's special guest is Quincy Beach, and today's topic is going to be talking about comic book collecting. Thank you so much, Quincy, for joining us today.
No problem. I'm kind of excited to, get into it. I always love talking about comic books.
No, it's an exciting time to because we've talked about kind of autographs with people, we've talked about props, and now jumping into comic books, which I know, of course, is a big part of collecting for a long, long time. So,
hmm
just to kind of jump right into it to learn a little bit about yourself, what was the thing that kind of got you into comic book collecting?
Well, see, I was about 10 years old when all the MCU stuff was going. So, me and my brother watched all those movies as they came out, and then eventually, I got my first job, and I was like, let's start spending this on something. And so I was like, oh well, I love superheroes and I love Marvel. Let's start comic books.
So, in those cases, do you have a favorite character that you kind of focus on?
I would say my favorite character would have to be Silk because when I first got going with comic books, it was like the newest book that was out. And so it was like, oh, well, I've never heard of this character before. Let's pick this book up real quick. And ever since then, I've been just kind of like anything Silk, I got to pick it up and grab it.
is there is there something that draws you to that character in those cases?
Um, I don't know. She's a lot different than like the main Marvel characters. It was something that wasn't like mainstream superheroes. Like, you hear about your Spider-Man, your Hulk, your Captain America, Iron Man. I was like, okay, this is something a little bit outside of that bubble of popularity that I
Mhm.
can, get into and not have to go 50, 60 years in the past to know the full story of.
Yeah, and that's kind of an interesting thing because I mean, like myself, Spider-Man's my personal favorite,
Mm-hmm.
and the newer kind of like the newer Marvel characters and stuff like that. It's actually very interesting to speak to people who are really big fans of those newer characters, like the ones that have come over the last maybe 10, 15 years, maybe even 20 years in those cases. But it's interesting to hear kind of bringing in those newer characters on top of your kind of legacy ones like you were talking about, like you have your Spider-Man, and you have, even going all the way back, you have your Batmans and your Supermans. You have all
Mm-hmm.
of those, but kind of bringing it into the modern age, there is a lot of very interesting characters that have been introduced over the years.
And I think, that was kind of a thing for me when I was first starting. I was like, oh, who are all these new characters that, they're just getting going. So like, even today it's like these characters are the characters that I focus more on necessarily than a normal Captain America or that. Like, like a Miss Marvel Kamala Khan or a Miles Morales or a Silk.
Mhm.
So, those characters, I focus more on those than I would, you know, Peter Parker and Steve Rogers and all those guys.
Yeah, I actually see First Miles behind you there as well, so I was checking that one out right behind you.
Yeah, I picked that one up when before Into the Spider Verse came around, so I got it for a nice $60, which
Yeah,
was a pretty good investment.
it's funny. Going to all these comic book collections pre-COVID, and hopefully we get to kind of go back to stuff soon over the next year or so. But it's interesting to see kind of the shift in the pricing for a lot of these different things for a lot of characters, especially the newer characters that maybe collectors who have been collecting for 40, 30 years, like have been collecting a lot longer, maybe they're not as familiar with those newer characters, and then seeing them start kind of slowly being introduced into animated movies or live action movies, and started seeing those books start to climb in those
Yeah,
cases.
it's like those little sleepers that you never thought were gonna pop up,
Mhm.
but then now it's like Marvel's open to new bright ideas like the MCU, and then they're like, hey, we're gonna introduce this character, and people are like, oh, well, I know nothing about them. So they're like, oh, I gotta get their first appearance and their first number one. So it's like everything is skyrocketed if it's the first.
So that actually brings me to my next question is, and I've asked everybody this question, and it's always a difficult question for people who collect, but do you have a favorite comic book that's in your collection?
Um, I would have to say that first Miles. I don't know. It was just, lucky. I was lucky that I picked it up. You know, I thought with the $60 was a lot back in the day since I was, I didn't have as good of a job then, so money was tighter, and so you're like, oh, like this is $60. That's a lot, okay. And so, just picking that up and sitting on it, and then all of a sudden just blows up. It's nice. Plus, it's a character that I really love. So
Yeah, that's the best thing is that when you can find something on a character that you really enjoy and find a good deal on it. Because that one, what grade is that one? If I can kind of see it in the back there.
oh, let me grab it real quick. I can. It's 9.0.
That's a 9.0. That's a nice copy.
Yeah, it was in a poly bag, and I never took it out, so it got that little crease on the back from the poly.
Mm-hmm. So do you have for your collection? Because I mean, I know you have a couple graded stuff back there.
Mm-hmm.
Do you majority kind of keep your stuff raw, or do you have a lot of stuff that's slabbed?
I just really got into slabbing a lot lately,
Mm-hmm.
but most of my collection is raw, mainly because it's pricey to send stuff in, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you never know what's gonna get big. So it's like, should I slab it? Should I not slab it? You never know where the value is gonna go, and you feel like I might waste money if I slab something too early.
Of course. Yeah, I know that's always the trickiest thing is just trying to keep an eye on where the market is shifting in certain ways, and especially for across all different forms of collecting over the last year especially.
Mm-hmm.
Things have shifted so drastically. I know we've talked to mutual friends where the card collecting has gone crazy, the obviously the autograph kind of world has gone crazy, the everything's all over the place, crazier than even what it was prior to COVID and everything. So it's weird now that everybody's home and collecting different things. A lot of
Mm-hmm.
different and more people are getting into these types of things, and it changes the market, but you still don't know. It's just kind of just throwing a dart and trying to figure out what specifically is going to hit.
You could think you're ahead of it, but in all honesty, you probably won't be ahead of it unless you're buying everything. So,
Mm-hmm. I mean, a prime example is the other day I was looking at just values in general of comics, and I was noticing that first appearance of Mephisto was
mm-hmm.
going up to like some insane prices, and I'm sure like it was going up to some crazy prices prior to WandaVision, just because all the theories of WandaVision trying to, oh, Mephisto's going to show up, Mephisto's going to show up. But I'm actually kind of shocked that even after now WandaVision is done, that people are still, that book is still hot, even though he never actually did show up. It's just one of those things that kind of just stuck with that.
Yeah, it's just that anybody's like, oh, that's a key book, and then like people catch whiff of it, and then everybody's trying to sell it, and it's just say, oh, well, I should get this now before it's too pricey, and just everybody's going crazy, and everybody's thinking that everybody's gonna do this and that, so everybody's trying to get ahead of the game, when really I think we're all behind the game at that point.
Yeah. Well, I know that even like First Scarlet Witch and First Vision, those books, I had purchased those many years ago for
Mm-hmm.
less than $100 each.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're like, I went to a show in February of this year, and somebody wanted for like a pretty rough condition raw First Scarlet Witch. They wanted like $700, like $800, I think it was for it. And I just kind of stared at them and went, okay,
Are you
okay,
for real
sure.
about this?
I'm like, I know mine kind of looks like a rag. Mine's not that great of a condition, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I still think I did all right a couple years ago, but still.
And that was probably what was WandaVision out at the time? That was like,
yeah, it was like halfway through.
Got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's I just can't. It's hard. It's just hard to think about. Like, you know, if you would have got that a year ago or 2 years ago, it would have been significantly less. But now it's like
Mhm.
almost unattainable for some books. So
Yeah, it's weird because like you have your big gigantic books, like you have a Hulk 181, for example.
mhm.
Like I was noticing that a point 5 graded 181 is over 2 grand right now. Date like based on what they're kind of saying, like based on recent sales. And that's a point 5, which
Right.
seems a little insane for me. Which is very difficult for people to kind of get in. Like if you're getting into that now, it's a little like which way is that market going to shift over the next year or so? We don't really know.
Right. Ah, it's that's crazy. I don't know. I feel like, that book is too high up there now for anybody to even like try to grab it. Like, if it
Mhm.
was five, six, seven, 800, then people would be like, oh, I could possibly get that in the future. But now it's like, hey, if you're starting, like, good luck.
Yeah. Like I mean, and that's the craziest thing is that I mean, like I'm always trying to be very positive to people who are coming into this like now,
Mhm.
like especially there are going to be a lot of people who are brand new to collecting all different types of things that we discuss here, but it it's very tricky. You have to be, and we kind of get into this later, but you got to be very smart about it. Like you can't just kind of shotgun it
Right.
and just jump in. You have to go, okay, what makes sense for me and what I can do, and kind of ease your way in there. And exactly what you were talking about. The best way to really think about it is like, okay, what's my favorite characters?
Hmm.
What's my favorite storylines? Maybe if I've never actually picked up one of the books, which of the Marvel movies do I love, or which of the DC movies I love, or so forth,
Right.
and kind of just take that as a stepping stone, and then work your way. Because any of us, unless we've done very well for ourselves, are going to be very tricky to get into Batman and Superman because
Oh,
those
yeah.
are those are on a completely separate level. That's on a complete different place. My poor brother, who is a giant Batman fan, has to be very careful because he can only go so far timeline wise. Otherwise, it starts getting into like he needs a much better job to go into that. But kind of jumping into that, do you have like a comic that is kind of your dream comic, like the one that you would love to have in your collection?
Hmm. Give me a second to think about that. I'm trying to think about my favorite characters. Recently, there was this the first appearance. Well, actually, a Star Wars: The Clone Wars #1, but
Mhm.
a 9.8 grading. I know I sent mine in to get graded recently, but I know it's not going to get a 9.8, and 9.8s are shooting around 3,000 now. So it's
Mhm.
like, that's a dream book at this point because that's that's a half a used car or something.
Mhm.
Like weighing those kind of things, it's just like it's difficult to think about.
Yeah.
You just kind of have to get what you get now, or work with what you got.
Yeah, that's I mean that's always the thing to see, and it's actually very interesting to hear that um that's kind of your sought after book, at least like right now in your brain. I know that like
Hmm.
for me sometimes too, like I'll think of something right now and I'll go later on, I'll go, okay, it's gonna be something else. Like my brain will go someplace else with that. But it's interesting to hear that because like comic book collecting and just collecting in general is it's interesting to for different people that you have different views on what means the most to you in
Hmm.
those cases, because you have it where some people just are in it for the investment, some people are in it to just buy them, flip them, get them in and out in those cases, and then there's other people who really are passionate about any of those things other than what we're talking about right now or other types of collecting, where your view is like, okay, I'm not looking for a Detective Comics 27, I'm not looking for like
Hmm.
I'm not looking for an Action Comics 1, I'm looking for a Clone Wars one. Like, I mean, that's to other people. That's very cool. I really like that.
Thank you. Well, actually, I did think of one while you were saying it.
Mhm.
Avengers #1.
Okay.
Initially that. So it could be anything. It just to get your hands on one, to
Mhm.
find one, because they're so hard to find. I had an Avengers #2 in my collection at one point, and I well, it was a good sell for me because I used that money to go to Celebration, the last
Mhm.
Celebration. So I had to get rid of it to go to Celebration, which at the time was a little depressing. But I had a great time at Celebration. But still, it's like those older books are just the books that they're hard to get, and so that Avengers is one that I would be shooting for.
Yeah, it is tricky. Like, as you get older and older, a lot of times, especially for the Marvel stuff, at least from what I've seen from the Marvel side of things, Marvel, it's not really as much about if that particular comic is rare or not, in the sense of like how many copies were printed. It's really, in the Marvel case, it's like, what quality are they in? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
state are they in? Were they put in a basement where there was a water damage? Did somebody just like fold it in half and put it in a binder, or
Mm,
those types of things, or just crumple it up after they read it as a kid and just threw it in a drawer or something like that? Or you
right.
have those people who packed it away and they just immaculate. It just like comes out like it was printed the day before. So that's the trickiest thing. But I know from, I don't know if you've seen this before, like if you've come across other books. I know, like from the DC side of things. I know we're talking a lot about Marvel, but from the DC side of things, a lot of times those books are a lot rarer because DC printed a lot less in like
Mm.
in the 50s, or in that time period. So those usually cost a lot more because there's not as many printed as Marvel was printing.
I
Um,
know that DC did that. So that was a good
yeah,
little fact to know.
yeah. I mean, that's something that I remember talking to a comic dealer at a show. I believe it might have been New York Comic Con a couple years ago, but I remember, and him telling me that the reason why DC books go for a lot more is because it's not just about condition; it's that they're hard to find. Like, they actually just
Mm.
don't, as many copies exist, as, and a lot of times because people would just throw them out.
Mm-hmm.
I know that that's the case of my grandpa. When me and my brother first started getting really into comics, he's like, oh, I should have kept all those. Like, yeah, I hope you did. Like, I wish you did. I wish you did keep some of those. There might have been something in there that was worth. So I'm not expecting you to have like a Action Comics 1, but at the same time, I'm like, there might have been something in there that was a key that
There
that
might
would
be,
have been
yeah,
big.
there might be a little profit. Only 12 cents. You get $10 out of something, make a little profit.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, it's for these different publishers and different things. And before we actually knew other question, it just like for people listening, it's interesting. Like, we're talking about the big ones, we're talking about Marvel and DC, but of course you have your, like, your Image Comics. Yeah, you have all these other kind of independent book companies. You have Dark Horse, I know, for a long time they used to have Star Wars
Mm-hmm.
and everything. So it's interesting to kind of see these different franchises and different collections and where people go with it, with that. But kind of jumping off of, we're talking about comics of different time periods. One of my questions for you, just kind of personally, do you have like a preferred way that you store your comic books?
Um, you know, if it's just a basic book, well, a book that you're picking up on New Comic Book Day or something, it's just a plain old bag and board, nothing too crazy. But if it's like a more key issue or like a book that's like 10, 15, 20 plus dollars, then I'll normally just use a standard board. And then I think I use 2 milliliter Mylar
Mhm.
bags. I don't go with the 4 because they're too expensive. And it just, you know, I think the 2, you can get more bang for your buck. And then with the the rarer books or the more expensive books, I'll throw them in a hard case box. The I got a BCW one, like those black plastic ones instead of just
Mhm.
a standard box. And then, yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I started doing that as well, is switching over a majority of my books to those like hard cases, the hard long
Hmm.
boxes or the hard short boxes. I just kind of think in the long run of things, those are a better kind of investment if you
Right.
are going to start collecting stuff that's a little bit more value. Like you said, even going like $15 and up,
Yeah.
in the
And
scheme of things.
it's $20 more, but like let's think, your long box or your standard short box, you drop it, you bang it around, it could get beat up over the span of 5 years, and you might have to, get a new one.
Mhm.
So I think it's a great investment that will last for years and years and years to go.
Yeah, and I know that I'll put up a picture here on the screen too. Um, for that, I know they sell both the short box, the long box, and I know that they even have a graded one too. So you can put your graded comics in those hard cases as well. So it helps out a lot with that. So protect just kind of a longer thing, because if you're gonna look at it, even if you're not looking at it, you're collecting in the sense of you're investing your amount. You're still investing into your collection, so it's a good idea to
Hmm.
keep it protected for the long run
Right.
with that. But for that, uh, one of the things we've been talking about comics so much, and we kind of touched on other things. And I know I see some pops there behind you
Hmm.
too. But my next question was, do you collect other things other than comics? And if so, what's kind of your focus or kind of your favorite thing to collect other than comics?
um I collect autographs. I just recently I think I've been collecting for maybe a year and a half now, doing autographs. But I think the other thing I collect, Funko Pops. I have a huge collection. Well, I slimmed down recently, but I have a pretty big collection. And right when I was starting with comic books, I think about 3 months after I started with comic books, I picked up two Funko Pops, and I was like, oh, these are cool. Okay. And then, like, you go down the rabbit hole, and you're like, okay, well, if I get that one, I gotta get this one. And it's like, oh, Star Wars is coming out, because this was back in 2015. So then I had hopped back into Star Wars, and then it was like, oh, they got all 25 new Funko Pops coming for Star Wars, and you're like, oh, well, I gotta get them all. And then the completionist in you is like, okay, and let's get everything. And then, like, Star Wars Funko Pops just took off from there, and it was like, I could never catch up.
Mhm.
So I really love my Funko Pops, and I started to get some of them signed too, and so it's a nice little blend of all my worlds, because you can have the comic book Funko Pops, you have your Star Wars Funko Pops, you can get them signed. It's like all my collecting can be in one item.
Yeah, and it's cool to think too. I know that for some people have different views when it comes to pops. I mean, I love them too, and it gets a little out of hand when I start kind of going down the rabbit hole, like you said, with those things also. But it's interesting to see kind of the Funko Pops making their way into like comic book shops
Hmm.
too, and that becoming kind of an extension of a lot of people who are collecting, because it's a nice way. Like I mean, for me personally, I really started collecting Funkos because and you can kind of see it in the back there. There's like a Spider-Man up all the way at the top there, but
Okay.
like for example, they're like I'll collect them for that reason, is put them like kind of in a display. So like if you like have characters that fit together, have them
Hmm.
as a nice little kind of extra thing to have on your shelf for those different reasons. Or you could be those people who are collecting and standing in the virtual line waiting for the exclusives every time they release them. But you kind of have a different thing. It's really a cool thing, and I think they're here to stay. Too. People
No,
say they're gonna go out, but I
well,
think
no,
they're here to
I
stay.
think they're no Beanie Babies. They're definitely not Beanie Babies. I think they're here to stay. You know, they get different licenses every day. Every week they're pumping out new stuff or announcing
Mhm.
stuff in the future. They have football to hockey to Star Wars. It just anything and everything you can think of, they're probably gonna make a Funko Pop out of. and then have an obscure character or thing as a Funko Pop, like a
Mhm.
Kool packet. I saw a Kool-Aid packet Funko Pop. Like, who would think that would be a Funko Pop? So
Yeah. It's funny that like there's franchises. Like I've purchased pops that there's franchises that I never thought would actually get merchandise.
mhm.
And then there's like just like a random character for that. So it's funny with the into that. And then for the autograph side, since you brought that up too, do you have so do you focus on the Star Wars side of things or do you have kind of like a mix?
So I'm very limited because I don't really want to get my Funko Pop signed. I'd rather, you know, with SWAU, the group that we're in, there's just sometimes there's so many signings. It's like, all right, so I need to focus on, this photo or this poster, and then Funko Pops can come later on. So it's like trying to stay focused with the autograph aspect of it. It's what I'm trying to do. But I only have Star Wars signs so far.
Mhm.
But I hope to have more like Legend of Korra or Avatar in the future. I think that would be one I would want to get signed, or Zendaya. Just anything Zendaya I would like to get signed.
That's awesome. So, kind of jumping off of that, one of the questions I always ask people on here because we have people on here for various different levels of collecting, different ages and backgrounds. Do you have a kind of piece of advice that you'd like to give to other collectors, whether it be somebody who's just deciding to get into collecting or somebody who's collecting kind of similar things that stuff you've seen, like something that you would give advice to other people?
Um, the one that I think everybody says is, find a focus first. That's the biggest thing when it comes to collecting, because you know, when you just have a broad field, then you just are getting anything and everything, and you're, I would say, kind of wasting your money when in the long run, because you may not like that piece in the future, or something that you like, or that you didn't like that much, it may not be worth the same amount that you got it for. So I think that's the main one. But one that I always think is a good piece of advice for someone starting out: you can always upgrade. That's always what I have to think about when I'm getting something. Okay, if I have this now, you know, down the road, there'll be opportunities to upgrade what you got, whether it be a Funko Pop, or a lower grade comic. It's raw and beat up. You know, if it's okay, you got something for cheap because it's beat up. We'll just start off with that, and then down the road, if a nicer book comes to your way, maybe get that, and then sell the rougher one. So basically, just always you can always upgrade. Don't dwell on not having the pristine piece in your collection.
Yeah, and it's always the best place to start. I mean, that's the same view I have when I'm going out and I'll make my list of what books I'm looking for. So if I'm going out and looking for a comic book, I'll say, okay, this is the one that I am looking for at this time, but I'm not picky about the grade of it. I just want it in the collection. Like it's just as long as
Right.
it's there, that's great. And exactly like you said, you can always upgrade because you never know, like even if it might take you a while, you never know like what your life situation may be years from now that maybe you're in a position where you can sell off that original copy and get one that's a lot nicer than the one that you
Right.
used to have. So like always have that and just have kind of the pleasure of having it in your collection, especially if it's a character you really love or a storyline or background or anything like that. With that, I think that's a good piece of advice.
Right. And just, a little bit more about that. Like, if you've been looking for it for a long time and you come upon it, I would say get it. You've wanted it for a while, get it and go upgrade down the line. So,
Mhm. A big piece, and just kind of going off of what we're talking about, and part of this series altogether, and having people here to kind of talk about these different things is make friends. Like
mhm,
make friends within those different collecting fields because that's always going to help you out. Because I know that like I've made friends with the comic book dealers that I see at every single show, like the same like three guys.
Hmm.
So they know that you're good. They know that you're good for what you're doing, and they know that you're
Right.
passionate about it. And they're there to help you out. So like you might find the deal that you never know. And also just making friends of like other people to talk to about stuff, because it's a great way. Like what we're trying to do here is kind of build that community of where
Hmm.
we can all be very open about what type of different things that we collect, and everybody's collection is fantastic, no matter how big or small your collection is. Like
Hmm.
everybody has something that you might have like three pieces in your collection, but you have one piece that other person's like, you have that. Like
Right.
you have that piece, you have that one thing. It's always fun, because then that way you can share those stories, and you can, and you never know, somebody might throw you like a link to something that just magically appears, like somebody else is looking out for your back when you're looking for stuff, and you find good stuff. So it's very, it's great to have that community. Don't be really, it's not good to be insular and kind
Right.
of like, and keep yourself away from everybody.
And it makes it, kind of more fun when you're hunting too, because you may be focusing on yourself and hunting for yourself, but if your buddy needs a certain book or has this focus, and you're like, oh, let me pick this up for him because I know he'd like this.
Hmm.
Like, Jared and his Rainbow Bridges.
Hmm.
I'll go be going through boxes and I'm like, oh, Rainbow Bridge, sweet. And I get excited about it because I know my friend's going to be excited about it.
Yeah, it's like a few years ago, my brother was looking for all the appearances of Ace the Bat Hound.
Mm.
So he had a list of every appearance. So he went online, did the research, found every single appearance. And that was the thing for like 2 years. Every time we went to a show, each of us that was there with him at the convention would have that list. So like every booth we would go through, just go through every box, or look on every wall. And that was like, it wasn't even looking for myself, but like you said, it's fun. It's fun kind of trying to that search. I think that's kind of bringing it all around to our conversation today. I think that's the kind of the best part about comic book collecting is
Hmm.
it feels like you're Indiana Jones in the sense, like you're very, like an archaeological dig, like you're going through and you're trying to find that jewel that is hidden there, because like sometimes you'll go to a place and people put, of course they have their wall books, they have all their
Hmm.
the big books in the back on a convention or at a comic shop. But every now and then you'll come across something and you go, wow, why is this in a box? Like this is,
Hmm.
like I was digging through this box, I would have never found this unless I just started going through each of those boxes. And when you hit that moment, and let's say you have a book you're randomly looking for that has that, if you have that book that you're randomly looking for that is maybe not as a well-known book, and you find it, that moment to you is like, oh wow. It's like
Right.
that eureka moment for that. So it's great. It's I think that's kind of one of the best parts of collecting comic books. All right, so I mean, talking about kind of the fun of looking for different comic books and going through that, it's really it's really a great thing. I really love, and I miss that, and I'm really looking forward to
Hmm.
being able to kind of freely go to shows and events and doing that again with other people, especially with new friends
Hmm.
too, as we go into that. So in that sense, I kind of want to wrap things up from there. If there's any other kind of comments or anything you want to say from there, I mean, I open it up to you. But otherwise, I want to thank you again for joining us today.
Well, yeah, no problem. I had a lot of fun talking about it because we whenever we get to talk, we're not always talking about comics, but just to kind of focus in on stuff is fun. But I think the last thing I had to say is like I think comic book collecting is it's it's kind of one of my favorite. I would say it's my favorite out of all the collecting things because the community is a lot different than a lot of communities. Like before we said that to find a friend in this community is sweet because everybody's looking for the same thing. Everybody's just helpful in this community. Whereas some other groups could be a little like focuses. It could be a little fighting. You could have
Hmm.
at times. So I think whenever all the experience I've had with comic books has always been like, hey, here's this. This is a positive experience that I've had. Or, oh, you have that book. That's cool. Or, hey, I heard about this. Maybe you should do this. You know, it's always people helping people out. And I've never really met like a sneaky, mean fan, you know. So I'm happy to be a part of this community.
Awesome. That's great. So, Quincy, once again, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your day today to spend it with us and talk about comic books. Hopefully, we can all get together another time, talk about some other things. But I want to thank you again. For everybody watching right now, if you enjoyed this video, please remember to always like and subscribe for more. We're going to have some more interviews upcoming soon. And in the meantime, as always, remember, keep on collecting. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more. Remember to click that bell notification to be notified when we post new content. You can follow us on our social media links for additional content and updates on future videos. The links are provided in the description below. And always remember, keep on collecting.